Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah, and I'm here with David Chudyk, and he is the weekly wealth guy. I was actually fortunate enough to be on his podcast, and we talked money mindset. And I'm so excited to introduce him to you guys. He's a financial advisor and thinks well about money, which so many of us, that's such a scary topic and a scary conversation, especially if we were in a relationship where someone else handled the money and handled the thinking of the money. And now it is our job. Hey, David, how are you?
Hey, how are you? I'm glad to be back with you. I know that we had a great episode of my show that's going to be coming out, and I just love money, and I love what money can do for us, and how money should be able to make our lives and allow lives around us better. So I love talking about it.
I love that. I had a dinner with a friend last night and actually told her about being on your podcast and our conversation. And she said, it's so interesting because women are so focused on security for themselves and like that feeling of security, but then we don't often feel comfortable talking about money and worrying about money and thinking about money. And it's really difficult to have a sense of security and not feel secure in your finances and wealth, right?
Absolutely. And what we all tend to do when we don't understand anything is we tend to procrastinate, which means, hey, there's a bill on my desk. If I don't open that bill, that means I don't have to acknowledge that I owe that money, which means I can kind of forget about it and not talk about it. And then obviously that has negative consequences down the line. So money is one of the more important factors in our lives, because when your money's not in order, and when I say in order, you don't have to be rich, whatever your definition monetarily of rich is, you don't have to be that, but our money has to be kind of in shape, because if our money's not in shape, it affects our health. Stress wise, it affects our ability to pay for gym memberships, and if there's exercise, it affects our relationships. Absolutely. It affects our parenting skills. I mean, have you ever been stressed out about money, then you kick the dog, or short tempered with your kids? So and money is a spiritual subject as well. So if you look in your checkbook, that kind of tells what's important to you. So
Agree. And on the parenting thing, we kind of get this really yucky idea in our head if like we're looking to create security for ourselves through wealth or building businesses or money, that we get this idea like, oh, those bad people who they're just looking to buy Bentleys. I don't think you're bad if you have a Bentley, but it's just like, oh, I'm above that. Money's not important to me because I don't need that Bentley. But maybe your child needs braces, right? That's several $1,000s. Maybe you're wanting to create some type of account for your children as they get older, or grandchildren, or cushion, or somebody gets sick. Money is not evil.
no, I actually had clients pop in the office yesterday, and they were so proud. They brought their little granddaughter, who was that big, so a couple months old, and they had started a little account for their other grandchild, and they were coming in and say, hey, we need to get the same account started. And these are people that they're not wealthy, but they're doing well. They live within their means, and you could just see the joy on their face, knowing that when this little baby, who all she cares about is eating and pooping, but when she's 18 or 20, she's going to have thousands of dollars because her
Mm-hmm.
grandparents loved her enough and had the ability to start a small account. And who doesn't want to be, another 20 years from now, knowing that, hey, my grandchild can now buy a house because they have this down payment, or my grandchild can pay off that student loan. And that's kind of what money is. It should enrich our lives. So it enriched their lives by starting the account, and it certainly will enrich the granddaughter's life as she gets past the all I care about is eating and pooping stages of her life.
You brought up two investments: investing in your education, or investing in real estate or property. And that's really important too, right? Because sometimes we think about having money and it's just like, oh, if I spend money, maybe people are really tight. They're on the other end of like, oh, I can't spend any money. Well, there's a difference in debt and investing in yourself, right?
There's no question. And I came up with a formula that we're not going to necessarily go through today, but it was about the basics of financial security. And B is budget, A is allocation, then S is systems, I is insurance, C is caring, and S is support. But when you look at your money and your financial resources, it needs to be allocated in a way that makes sense for you. So that may include owning some rental properties. It may include, or it should definitely include some sort of an emergency fund for 3 to 6 months of your family's living expenses. Things happen, right? I mean, houses blow up, cars need, it should include some stocks and bonds, and we could kind of debate how much based on your circumstances, even some crypto. It should, so there are a lot of equity in businesses. So where we put money is very, very important. And that's something that needs to be taken very seriously because a lot of people just don't really think about it.
And they don't think about it because they don't understand, because they just want to avoid it. They just want to drift away from it. What is your thoughts on why I don't want to think about it? I'll be honest and say that's something I have to, it's like eating my vegetables. And I'm not afraid of it necessarily. It's just, it's not as fun for me. It's not as comfortable.
Sure. So I went to a seminar years and years ago for the Financial Planning Association, and there was actually a therapist just kind of talking about behaviors. And the therapist asked, what is the cause of procrastination? So most people raised their hand and said some form of laziness, right? Sarah procrastinates because she's lazy and doesn't want to work hard. Well, the real net cause is perfectionism. So someone who likes excellence in their life, they're going to do the things that they are very good at.
Yes.
Okay. So as we discussed yesterday, you are an excellent communicator. So you're not going to procrastinate with anything regarding talking because you like to talk and you're good at it. Now, as someone who's an achiever, the things subconsciously that you're just not all that good at and you don't understand, you're going to kind of put those to the side. And
numbers, girl.
Absolutely. Yep. So you either need to become a numbers girl or align yourself with some other numbers person, which could be, family members, professionals, and everything else. But procrastination and putting things to the side it's really a form of perfectionism. And it's actually a compliment when you say I kind of procrastinate, because it means that you care. Because if you just did stuff mindlessly and didn't care about making mistakes, you would not be an excellent person. So it's a positive and a negative, but it's important for us to recognize kind of our personality traits.
Yeah. So what other emotions can get involved in our relationship with money? I love the idea of procrastination and perfectionism. Any other emotions clouding our judgment?
Well, this might actually not be an emotion. It might be a lack of emotion, but mindlessness. So have you have, or I certainly do, and I assume most people do, have something that you can eat a whole bag of and not realize you ate it. So a whole bag of Doritos, I would never say I should eat a whole bag of Doritos, but you put them in front of me, they're gone. So we all act mindlessly in a lot of ways with money. You may have a weakness of Starbucks or drive-throughs, and it doesn't matter how wealthy you are, the $5 and $10 here and there, but then, pro athletes, they may go and buy a $5,000 bottle of champagne, which kind of adds up. So we need to not drift. We need to not be ignorant, and we need to not be mindless. So one of the things that I'm working with the financial literacy program is we tracked where our students are spending every dollar, and everybody came back and said some form of, holy crap, I should have several $100s per month extra, and I don't. I have no idea why. Well, it's the $5 coffees, it's this and that. So mindlessness is very, very important to try to avoid. It's the same thing with anybody who's trying to lose weight. If you track what foods you eat, all of a sudden you don't eat 4 candy bars or whatever that thing is that is your weakness. So mindlessness, and nobody ever drifted to excellence. You can kind of drift to okay. If you have, yeah. So drifting doesn't work in relationships. It doesn't work with health, and it certainly doesn't work with money.
Yeah. We talk about healing a lot in this podcast, in this conversation. So if I said no one drifted their way to a happy ending, they would go, yes, that sounds like Sarah. So I also want to say no one drifted themselves to wealth. I think that's a great.
And the people that did drift, like inherited money, oftentimes they don't handle it well. And it goes, either the wealth goes or the wealth creates problems, because with excess money, especially when you're young and maybe irresponsible, there's a lot of trouble you can get if you have a couple commas in your bank account and you haven't been taught how to deal with money. And again, that happens with a lot of famous people that all of a sudden get huge salaries and a couple $1,000,000. And the only difference between them and us is they have a heck of a lot more time on the way, a lot more fun on the way down than we do with 2 or 3 commas in their bank account.
I watched a reunion last night. I won't say what show it was, but people who had made lots and lots and lots of money and then came back nearly 20 years later and met again. And they all seemed so sad. I mean, they really did. They were on television. So it wasn't like, yeah, but it would just seem like this layer of sadness. And I thought, oh gosh, you're like the people who people would think, oh, if I could just have been as famous as, if I just had as much money as, so it could definitely, money doesn't solve every problem, but we talked yesterday about it being a better set of problems.
Correct. So lack of money creates issues. So if you have children and you can't afford food, obviously that's a huge problem. Now you get to the other end of the spectrum where there's excess money, and then, self-esteem issues come into play, and maybe, being overly flashy because you're covering up other issues in your life. So that's where the relationship with money, we all need to look in the mirror and say, what does money mean to me? Now, there's nothing wrong with having a really nice car if it's in your budget, but also many just kind of redneck millionaires drive around an old beater truck, and that's fine also. Neither one is right or wrong. It's what's in your heart that matters. And if I have a really nice car and it has a huge loan on it just so I could think that I'm better than Sarah and that she'll think that I'm really, really rich, well then, yeah, that's an unhealthy way to handle my money. But if I'm able to comfortably afford a car that's very nice or a super nice house, and I'm meeting all of my other obligations and I'm a decent human being, then hey, that's just a privilege of some of the hard work that I've done to develop resources.
And money to me means choices. It was very clear as soon as you said that. If I am in a scary situation and I have built wealth for myself, I have means to get help that I need, even if I, have to pay for it, have to pay for like a lawyer or something like that. It's like, okay, I can do that. If I need to create safety nets and cushions around my kids, I can do that. Their education, if I want to hire a tutor, their whatever, they want to do some crazy space camp. It's like, yes, I can do that. It's choices to me, and choices of not putting up with bad behavior, which I think will resonate with a lot of my listeners. If you are in a place where you don't feel like you have a lot of financial choices, you often lower your standards of what you put up with because it doesn't feel like a choice.
There is no question. And really, that's all money is. Money is choices and options. That's all it is. If you can afford a filet mignon and you still just want a Chick-fil-A sandwich, you get the Chick-fil-A sandwich. That's okay. But if you can only afford, a can of SpaghettiOs, well, then that's the only thing that you can have. So money provides choices and allows you to not be limited. Now, there's the other side of it is if your monthly obligations are so high, even if you have a high income, sometimes you become a slave to monthly payments. And, there are plenty of people out there with houses, they have the $1.5 million house that they can barely afford, where if they only had a $750,000 house, they could leave that job potentially that they hate, but they can't because there's no margin. So the money part and managing your assets gives freedom. And then it's up to us just to kind of keep that margin with our decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's white around the paper for a reason. Margin is one of my mother's favorite words. So she says, this is funny. You'll think this is funny, David. She says, I need more margins around my time, which we were discussing before you and I went live.
So your mother was actually very smart, huh? Look at that. I love it.
Yes. Oh, that's so funny. So let's talk about risk. How do we manage risk when it comes to money?
So as an investment advisor, even during the last few years where accounts have been going up by 10 to 35%, people will still have the irrational thought and question of, well, if I invest with you, can I lose all my money? And the answer is, I guess, in theory, yes. But the stock markets, and our firm has a very strong investment process, but I can't, and our chief investment officer can't control what the markets do. If the terrorists bomb Wall Street, which I have zero control over tomorrow, there's probably going to be a negative effect on your retirement account. If COVID comes again, look what happened. Of course, it came back. So when we're thinking about risk, yes, having an investment strategy is important, but let's think about the things that we can control. So let's think about maybe your client who is on a third marriage, never dealt with all of the legal paperwork, and her first husband, who's no longer a good friend, is still a beneficiary on a life insurance policy just because she never dealt with it. Gets COVID, gets hit by a car. Now, he has a girlfriend, he has other, so that's totally under her control, and that controls risk because now, presumably if if she has kids, now that life insurance may not be going to the kids. So things like your wills, your beneficiaries are so controllable. You just have to do it. Things like proper insurance. So let's say you are a client of mine and we've developed a multi-million-dollar portfolio and you're doing really well, but you don't have a good car insurance agent and you just don't understand insurance. Well, and I don't really understand it and I don't want to pay for it. It's a racket. And so just give me whatever I need to have. And then I know you would never do this, but maybe the one time you look at your phone and you run a stop sign and tragically you kill 3 people. Well, either your insurance company is going to pay those damages or you are. And in this case, you didn't have proper insurance. So even though we had a great portfolio for you, it's all gone, or a lot of it is gone. So that's a way to mitigate risk. And think about how much worse that would be if that were a period of market downturn. So let's say you had a $3 million portfolio, and just because of COVID or some other market issue, it was down to 2 million, and then you caused that major accident. You just locked in a loss. So it's a double whammy. So things like that, that's under your control. The stock markets are not. If the Republicans or the Democrats, whoever you like, if they get elected, that's not directly under your control. But asking your insurance agent, hey, what's the worst case scenario if I cause a major car accident? That's under your control. Beating inflation, right? So how much the stuff that you buy, it costs more this year than last year. So we often deal with people who say, well, I don't want to risk any of my money and I just have it in a savings account. And actually was dealing with a client recently who had several $100,000 just in cash, which is way too much for him. And, we kind of have the discussion of, well, milk it's like literally $1 more per gallon this year than last year. Your several $100,000 literally got 0.01% return. Inflation numbers just came out at over 4%. So you're getting a negative 3% return on your money for spending power. So what we did was we kind of came up with a compromise, how much cash he should have, of which he's keeping a little bit more than I would like, but it's his money. But then we're kind of putting the rest to work because he has to beat inflation. So those are the kind of things that we can all do that are totally under our control. And they can help us to de-risk our financial lives. And then the other things that are not under our control, the government policies, who gets elected, who doesn't get elected, the COVID, terrorist attacks, all those, the housing crisis. You didn't cause the housing crisis. I didn't cause the housing crisis, but it had negative stock market implications. But if you had all that other stuff under control, at least you're controlling what you can control.
Yeah, somewhat of a cushion. Yeah, somewhat of a cushion.
It is a cushion for sure.
Now, do people avoid this like with some type of like victim mentality of like, I'm a victim to things I can't control? Or how do you help people move past that?
I think that the estate planning issues, people just don't want to think about that, hey, I'm going to die one day, because who wants to think about that? So just dealing with who gets my money and how do I change my beneficiaries, people just don't want to think about it. And many wealthy people don't have wills and things like that set up. But I do think that there is a victim mentality, and then there's also kind of a lack of a desire to look at what our financial situation is. Because if you're like me, you don't have as much money as you thought you would at this age in your life when you were young. That's just kind of the way it is. So by not looking at stuff, and then you also can say, well, those evil rich people, I don't have as much money as I should because the CEO of Coke and Pepsi makes $50 million. Well, those are two separate, they're not related at all. So you're going to be a very valuable member of society, or you're not. Mm-hmm. Most rich people got rich by providing a lot of value to the world. Mm-hmm. Some of them got there by lying and stealing, but most got there by providing value. And the some that got there by greed and lying and stealing, we can't control that. And we just still need to bring as much value to the marketplace as we can to increase our income. I came up with kind of an 8-step process for financial wellness. And one of them, when we talk about budget, is obviously your income minus expenses has to equal greater than 0. But a lot of the budgeting people that write books that you've heard of, all they're talking about is the expenses. Cut this out, don't ever go to Starbucks, don't ever go out to eat. Did you buy nice hair products? Well, don't do that. Well, and that's obviously, we need to look at our reality, but the easier part is, hey, if I could figure out how to double my income, I could figure out how to spend a little bit more money on the stuff that I like. And I know that one of your major accolades is that you help people to make more money, and they end up getting raises, and that just makes budgeting a heck of a lot more fun. If you're making minimum wage, or if you're making a couple $100,000 a year, there's a little bit more margin when you have a couple $100,000 a year of income coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. And more choices, more security, more safety, more of that good stuff that we love, right?
When it comes down to it, once you're a grown up, now as a kid, sometimes depending on your circumstance, you don't have a choice. But once you're a grown up, whatever age we want to call grown up, we all have to own our situation. And we just say, hey, maybe some people had a tough childhood. Yes. I mean, there's no doubting that some people had easier childhoods than others. Some people had better parents. Some people had no parents. But we all have to dig out of that when we get to a certain point of adulthood. And we can always ask ourselves, has anybody in my position ever done this, whatever this is? And the answer is yes. So if somebody else can do it, I can dig out. And I think that that can definitely happen.
That's a great point. And I do a lot of work on people not getting caught in hurt people, right? Because that experience of lots of people have had bad things happen to them. Is there an absolute 100% correlation between if you were abused that you abuse others? Well, no, of course not. So can that be the answer? And that when you think about building wealth, building success, it's what's the one piece of correlation? And they step into being a grown-up. They step into taking responsibility for their own lives.
Yeah. But to give an example, so if I look at my children, they have literally every possible advantage that can be imagined. They've never needed anything. Now, we're not whatever you'd want to say, but they've never needed anything. They've never been that field trip that we had to tell them, yeah, you can't go on the field trip. They have 2 parents that love them. We used to live right next to my in-laws. So they literally had their grandparents next door. So they had 4 grownups who literally dedicated their lives. So they have more advantages than many, many kids. I mean, there's no question there are kids who are in broken homes, kids who have abusive parents. However, the kids from the broken homes that don't have the advantages that my kids had, at a point, it may be more difficult, but when they're grown-ups, they're going to have to say, this will not defeat me. Maybe I need to talk to Sarah K Ramsey about some strategies. Maybe I need some counseling. Maybe I need to surround myself with good people, but I can beat this and I can be successful, whatever success means to me. So the victim mentality, we're all dealt the hand that we're dealt, and some of us are dealt worse hands than others, but we all have to get to that point where we just own our results and start making a little bit of progress. And it's hard. I mean, there's no demeaning. If somebody had a rough go of it, this is not to say you're a bad person. It's just to say that you can't let that bad past defeat you, because then it wins and you can't let it win.
Yeah. At some point with money or anything else, it's like, okay, it was not going well. I need it to go well. And David, I may have told you the story about my name. So Sarah Ramsey put up with all kinds of stuff that she wishes she had not. People pleasing, bad behaviors, all this kind of stuff. Sarah K Ramsey doesn't put up with that stuff anymore. And it was a real definitive switch for me in my personal responsibility and growing up. And now when I hear, I'm so glad you added Sarah K Ramsey when you said that, because when people say Sarah Ramsey, it's a little jarring for me because it was an identity change for me. It was like, this is who I am now. This is the personal responsibility I'm stepping into, and a different version of myself.
Wow. Yeah, and I think how we all see ourselves, it really, really impacts what we do, and then what we do impacts our results.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
and just to give you an example, in my life I've run 5 marathons. So at my first 2 were at pretty good times for like quote regular people. But when you tell someone, and then the last one was a few years ago, and that was 15 years, 13 years later, a couple pounds later. But you tell someone, hey, I'm trying to run a marathon. You get two answers. Oh, I could never do that. Well, if your knees hold up and if you're below 50 or 60 and you give yourself a year, you can do it. It's hard, and it takes less TV watching because you have to get out there, and you get well, I don't have time to train. Well, the only thing you and I or anybody else have the exact same of is time. That's the only thing. So I remember.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I remember I would go to Planet Fitness and I ran 90 or 120 minutes on a treadmill when it was raining at night after putting the kids to bed, because it was just a priority at that point. So other people were watching TV. So I identified as someone who has time to train for a marathon and did it. And actually my slowest time at my oldest one was the most satisfying because of the obstacles of being older and having kids and everything else. Other people identified as I could never do that. And that was true for them as well. They couldn't do it because they didn't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And, I say the same thing about healing after a toxic relationship. It's like, I remember one time I was talking to a lawyer and she was saying like, oh, that's so great that you have so much flexibility in your schedule and you can go to stuff with your kids. It was like, yeah, a magic fairy came down and like sprinkled fairy dust on my head and made that happen. And of course she giggled, and it was like, yeah, I made choices and took risks and took a chance and put myself out there to create this life and this version of living. So yes, it's all in how we identify ourselves, right? Okay, so usually on the Toxic Relationship podcast, when people are talking about porn, it's because they're mad somebody close to them was watching it. Okay, but you're talking about financial porn. Tell me what that means.
Yeah, so financial porn. So let me give full credit. A guy named Bill Backrack, who is he kind of founded the principles, and he's a coach of financial advisors, and he came up with a system called values-based financial planning. And what it basically means is that we should focus working with clients on helping them to achieve their values with their money. And so, you probably really don't care where your money's invested as long as you have whatever amount of money you're going to need to pay for your kids to go to college. And do you care if you beat the S&P 500 by 2 points or 1 point or not, if when they grow up, you have the money? So that was kind of his idea is the value might be sending your kids to college. The details should be left to the financial planner. But financial porn is CNBC, it's MSNBC, it's Fox Business, it's the headline. Like I saw a headline yesterday on CNBC, and it said S&P flat struggles to stay at records high. Like it's a negative. I'm like, holy crap, it's higher than it's ever been. And they're making that seem like a negative. So if I had that emotional kind of no backups in my mind, I'd say, man, maybe I need to get out of the market because it's struggling to stay at the highest it's ever been because it didn't go up by 2% again. So the sensational media and all these articles, and now Facebook ads, Bitcoin's going to go up to 1 million, or you're going to lose all your money in Bitcoin. I mean, there's both sides of everything. So there's so much irrational information that's designed to get clicks, and it's designed to get viewers. And that's all it's designed to do, is get clicks and viewers. And mostly bad news and scary news gets clicks and viewers. Because if I would have said, hey, the S&P is at record high today, nobody cares. It's almost expected nowadays. But hey, it's struggling to stay at it's down slightly and it's struggling to stay at the record high. Well, that's scary. Let me cash out and go into all cash because it might, it's struggling. There should be no struggle in that sentence. But the words that the media chooses are very, very important.
So my listeners, I'm always talking about studying narcissism, right? There's nothing wrong with it at the beginning, but it's very sensationalized, right? Like the secrets to beating the narcissist. It's like, ooh, let me see. And it's like, well, they have a personality disorder. Like it's not like there's no changing them, how to get the narcissist to do what you want. It's like, there's some strategies you can use, but it's very sensationalized and it's all about them and that clickbait of like, let me tell you my abuse story. And it turns into this like snowball of like, whoa. And it honestly, I think it avoids helping people become grown-ups, right? Because when it's just panic and clickbait, rather than how can I make the personal decision to have my life here today and then have it here a year from now. That's where anyone who's successful, that's where it is. Here's where I am today. Here's where I want to be. What is the path to get there?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And what happens in the money world is whether they're well-meaning or if they're trying to sell books, there are a lot of authors out there that will have, here are the 9 questions you need to ask your financial advisor. How do you get paid? What are your fees? And let me ask you a question. Does Sarah K Ramsey work for free?
I don't.
You don't. I'm not going to ask you how much money you make, but you make a pretty good living. You're happy with that? Yeah. Okay. So if I engaged your services, I would have to pay you. Would I get more value from how much I'm paying you than should it matter how much your money you're making? Because am I going to benefit tremendously by engaging your service?
Absolutely. I think I told you about the girl on my thing who got the, I think the way she worked with me, she paid maybe, let's say it's $2,000. And then she got something that involved her getting a $15,000 a year raise within, a couple of months, like a job that was created for her. So the lifetime value of that 2,000, and then now she has a $15,000 increase. That's like, she's in a government position. So it's substantial. That's one example I know of recently. That's like a pretty darn good return on her investment.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times, in the financial advisor world, we typically, and this is kind of a broad statement, but we charge about a 1% asset management fee. So if you have a, $1 million account, you might be paying $10,000 to have your money managed. And some, there are times where, based on some of this financial porn and some of these articles about financial advisor, well, first of all, financial advisors have expenses and firms have tremendous expenses. So nobody's putting that 1% in their pocket. But second of all, if I helped you to have a disciplined investment philosophy and strategy and maybe talked you off the ledge so you didn't cash out when the market was down, and maybe I made sure that you had the right insurances, which may not even affect me financially, and maybe I told you, hey, I'm looking at this and 3 husbands ago, still your beneficiary, you might want to change that. Is that not worth $10,000 or $5,000 or whatever the fee is? So the intrinsic value of what we provide, sometimes the numbers look big, but the value is so important. Just like the doctor who does brain surgery on you, I don't know how much they make for doing brain surgery, but it's worth every penny because of how important it is that it happens correctly.
And there is an actual financial payoff. When I'm working with my clients, and that's kind of what's different about my work, it's like, no. There's a bottom line financial payoff to you being confident, feeling secure, knowing what problem to solve, having your head on straight. Like, it's not even like a gray area, like, oh, it's intrinsic and you'll feel better. No. There's an actual, there's a number correlation. When you have a better life and feel good about yourself and feel confident, and your ability to earn and create wealth is actually better. It's very, it's not even intrinsic what you're talking about. Yeah, you have intrinsic value to that as well, but it's a numbers game.
It absolutely is. Yeah. And one of my core kind of beliefs is that we all need to spend most of our time and effort dealing with the areas that we can't be replaced.
Agreed.
And to the extent that it's possible, we need to delegate or get support from experts. So, you kind of made some jokes about, you're not a numbers girl. Well, you need to either become a numbers girl, which probably is not going to happen because it's probably not your inherent skill, or you need to align yourself with somebody who can do that. We could all Google anything, but I mean, it
I
doesn't,
don't even know
it's
what to Google. But
exactly
that's it. When you have a true expert, there was a situation, a woman was going through a divorce, and I said, hey, you need to watch out. Your ex is going to go after the youngest child and all of a sudden pretend that he has a relationship with him so he can get 50-50 custody. And she goes, how did you know that she has 4 kids? The guy was ignoring the first 3 and going after the youngest one because of a child custody issue. Like, she hadn't even talked to a lawyer yet. I said, you better watch out for this. She goes, how did you know? He was doing this, he was doing this, he was doing this. And it's just like a good doctor who says, but have you also been having pain here? Have you
Right.
also been experiencing this here? When you have someone who sees these patterns, whether it's me seeing the patterns of relationships and growth, you seeing the patterns of wealth, it's like I don't even know what to Google.
Right.
It's like that woman could not Google, hey, my children's father's finally being nice to the 14-year-old. Is something good or bad? Like, why would she do that? But when I asked the question and she had 10 examples to like fill in the blanks and say, whoa, no, I definitely, not that she should watch out for the 14-year-old not to talk to his dad. That's not what I'm saying. But it was a very clear pattern that the 3 children he wasn't going to have to pay child custody for, he was still ignoring. And the 1 child he was going to have to pay child custody for, he was acting like he had a relationship so he could get 50-50 custody.
Well, until you've been through something like that, or you've been around people who've been through something like that, you don't, like you said, you don't know what you don't know. And that happens with money a lot, is people just simply don't know what they don't know. Had a client one time told me that he said, I'm going to move my money to you. And I understand there's a 1% fee and you're going to do a really good job. But my current advisor told me I don't have an advisor fee. So I just kind of want to let you know that I'm willing to spend more money to be with you because you're that valuable. So of course, I know the right question, and the terminology was not a lie. However, of course he had fees. There's always fees everybody gets paid in the companies. So I took the ticker symbols and I showed him what his 12B1 fees are. And they were just slightly lower than 1%. So he really wasn't paying me much more. Now, his other advisor didn't lie because technically they're not advisor fees. They're 12B1 fees, but they're fees. So, he didn't know to ask that. He didn't know that it was maybe an embellishment of the truth, if not a lie. But, and that's what, again, your doctor knows things. And if you don't trust your doctor, go to a different doctor, because that's why you go to the doctor, because they have the knowledge.
Well, that is one of my favorite questions to ask. And so after any doctor's appointment, any mental health provider, anything, or coach, when I'm talking to them, I'll say, are there any questions I should have asked and didn't because I didn't know better? And I ask that after every appointment, after everything, after talking to lawyers. Are there any other questions I should be asking that I don't know? And I've gotten some really great answers.
That's a good question to ask. Honestly, that really, really is. Because even the best advisor, the best doctor, the best professional, they can't read your mind also. And there may be something that's just kind of, just on your mind that they couldn't necessarily answer or couldn't know that was concerning you. So yeah, I love that.
And giving people permission, right? Because if they're trying to protect my ego and not make me feel stupid or something like that, or be nice, they have any people pleasing left over, they might not say, by the way, you're going to be in real trouble if you don't blah, 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 because they might feel mean or, considering their background. But if I open that door to say, I have ears willing to hear, is there anything else I should know? That's
well, that's why you're paying them, because you want to know. So if you're going to a doctor, you want the full expertise. If you're going to the attorney, and to me, there's nothing worse than an attorney or an accountant. And accountants, I think, are famous for this. They tell you what your tax burden for last year was, but they don't tell you what you can do proactively this year to make it lower. So to ask your accountant, hey, can I do something differently to pay less taxes? A lot of times they don't. They're a little bit more timid people. So to ask them, can I lower my tax burden? Sometimes there are some tricks, that are well within the rules that are fine, and other times they may not be, but it doesn't hurt to ask that question.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, David, tell people where they can find more about you.
Yes. So www.weeklywealthpodcast.com. We put out episodes on a weekly basis, and kind of the tagline of our show is we talk about the mindsets, the tactics, and the strategies that can help you to build and maintain wealth. So I love talking with people like yourself, and we didn't really get into specific kind of money topics as far as, but other times we'll talk to people who would talk, specifically about what type of life insurance might be good for you, or different types of retirement plans. So we do get into the mechanics as well. My email address is david@parallelfinancial.com. That's david@parallelfinancial.com. And you can also just put me in LinkedIn, and you can spell my last name. It's Chudyk. You probably won't pronounce it correctly, but I'm David Chudyk. And like I said, I love seeing how money can positively affect our lives. And I hate seeing how lack of money or lack of handling of money, because truly one of the most miserable people I've ever met was someone who had $30,000 a month income coming out of his inherited investment account. And it was never enough. Every month he needed more money. And this poor guy, all the bloodsuckers were constantly asking him for money, and he couldn't say no. And it was really sad. It was horrible. But it wasn't a lack of money. He had more money. He had a whole bunch of money, but it was lack of being able to handle it properly. So how we handle our money just has such an impact on our lives, our relationship, our health, our spirituality. And I'm really passionate about helping people to handle their money in a way that's appropriate for them.
Well, you need to send that guy's information to me, and I'll help him become toxic person proof. Because all my radars are like, oh, he can't say no.
That's right.
And managing your money and managing yourself around your money, right? And so that people living in that sense of like, oh, I have to do what everybody wants from a bad person, which is exactly what I help people with, which is probably why they're making more money after working with me. Getting rid of that emotional baggage and junk to do right by you and have that healthy relationship with yourself and money.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of years ago, I had a loaner car from the dealership, and they loaned me a Range Rover for like 3 days, and it was for an oil change. So I was like, yeah, I can't make it back to the dealership. Can I have it for an extra day? But it was funny how like 3 people almost mocked and insulted me when they saw me driving a Range Rover. One guy said, oh, we need to be charging you more because look at how you're rich. And I literally, is a guy I know. I said, oh, look who's judgmental. It's a loaner. And why wouldn't you be happy for me if I could afford a Range Rover comfortably? So, that people pleasing thing, when I was driving a super nice car around, and people definitely treated me differently, totally unwarranted, because it wasn't even my car, but it was definitely eye opening to see how sometimes people, they have to tear me down to build them up, because they perceived I could afford a really nice car, and obviously they couldn't. So somehow you have to tear me down to feel better about yourself.
It's so sad. And not one of the best pieces of our human experience. But well, David, thank you for coming on the podcast and helping us on our journey to becoming toxic person proof.
Perfect. I enjoyed it.